A mother's love is supposed to be unconditional, protective, unbreakable. But not this time. Because in 2016, in the quiet hum of a Houston hotel room, a mother made a decision. A decision that would leave her 4-month-old baby, Brielle Robinson, broken, battered, and lifeless. And why? Well, this wasn't about desperation. It wasn't about a mother pushed to her limits, gasping for help she never received. This was vengeance. Now, you might be thinking, vengeance? Against a 4-month-old baby? And yeah, I know, it sounds ridiculous. A baby at that age barely understands the world around them. They can't even hold a grudge if they tried. But this wasn't about Brielle. It was about Tradezsha Bibbs, a 29-year-old woman who found herself rejected, unwanted. And instead of moving on, she decided to take it out on the only person in her reach, her own daughter. The crime shook even the most seasoned detectives. Not because they hadn't seen tragedy before, but because of how cold, how calculated, how completely unnecessary it was. See, cases of child abuse are always horrific. But this was different. And what's worse, it wasn't some spur-of-the-moment, out-of-control rage. This was deliberate. For 2 days, Bibbs was alone with her daughter in that hotel room. And during those 2 days, every single time Brielle cried, she paid for it. Every tiny whimper, every desperate plea for comfort was met with something far, far worse than silence. By the time Tradezsha Bibbs finally called 911, Brielle wasn't just hurt. She was gone. The medical examiners would later reveal the truth. Injuries so severe, so extensive, that they weren't just from that night. This baby had been suffering for far longer than that. Now, here's where it gets even more unbelievable. When Bibbs was finally confronted, when detectives sat her down and asked, why, she didn't deny it. She didn't cry. She didn't beg for forgiveness. Instead, she shrugged and admitted she just didn't care anymore. I need you to let that sink in. Because this story isn't just about a crime. It's about a complete, devastating failure of humanity. A baby who never got the chance to grow up. A mother who chose violence over love. And a courtroom that would later decide, if you can take a life so easily, you should spend the rest of yours behind bars. But how did we get here? What really happened in those final moments? And how does a mother reach the point where she stops seeing her own child as a baby and starts seeing her as a burden? Stick with me, because this is one case that will leave you questioning everything. Some mothers rock their babies to sleep with lullabies. Others hold them close, whispering promises of love, of safety, of forever. But Tradezsha Bibbs, her lullaby was silence. And forever, well, forever was about to be taken away. Before that hotel room, before the brutal end, there was a beginning. A young woman, a 29-year-old mother, alone, raising a baby after the father walked away. Now, being a single mother isn't easy. The sleepless nights, the exhaustion, the loneliness. It's a battle that millions of women fight every day. But for Bibbs, it wasn't just a struggle. It was something else entirely. At first, she tried. She really did. She fed Brielle. She changed her. She cradled her in the late hours of the night. But something shifted. A tiny crack formed. Maybe it was the weight of responsibility, the isolation, the realization that this was it. No more carefree life, no more romance, no more freedom. Or maybe, just maybe, she never wanted to be a mother at all. Her love didn't turn to exhaustion, it turned to resentment. At first, it was small things, the crying, annoying, the late-night feedings, frustrating, the endless need for attention, suffocating. And then came the rage. Was she feeling trapped? Was she crying for help? Or did she simply stop caring? Because in that moment, in that dim hotel room, when Brielle cried for comfort, her mother didn't hear a baby. She heard a burden. And Tradezsha Bibbs was about to take matters into her own hands. What happened next wasn't just an act of violence. It was a mother making a decision. And once she made it, there was no going back. April 2016, Houston, Texas. A mother and her child step into a hotel room. It should have been a place of rest, a quiet retreat from the world. But inside those walls, something was unraveling. Tradezsha Bibbs sat on the edge of the bed, her 4-month-old daughter Brielle in her arms. Motherhood hadn't been what she expected. The sleepless nights, the loneliness, the weight of it all pressing down. But this wasn't just exhaustion. It wasn't just frustration. It was something much worse. Brielle cried, a soft, helpless wail, a plea for comfort. Bibbs didn't pick her up gently. She didn't rock her or whisper soothing words. Instead, she lifted her and let go. The baby hit the floor. Not once, not twice. Again and again. A fragile body tossed like she was nothing, crying, gasping, reaching for a mother who had already decided. She was done. But the crying only made Bibbs angrier. So she used her hands, a slap, a punch, tiny ribs too delicate to withstand the force, chest, face, over and over, not to quiet her, not to teach her, just to end it. And then there was silence. Bibbs had what she wanted, but silence doesn't erase what's been done. And soon the only sound in that hotel room would be the wail of an ambulance, rushing in, too late. Tradezsha Bibbs didn't call 911 when Brielle cried. She didn't call when her tiny body hit the floor, not even when her breathing became ragged. Number she only called when the crying stopped. By the time paramedics arrived, the hotel room was quiet. Bibbs, standing over Brielle's motionless body, held her phone in one hand, her expression blank. Regret? Panic? Neither. Because if she had truly regretted what she'd done, she would have called sooner. Texas Children's Hospital. The ER team moved fast, but as soon as they laid eyes on Brielle, they knew. This wasn't the first time she'd been hurt. It wasn't even the second. Her fragile ribs, broken. Some injuries fresh, others older, healing. Evidence of weeks, maybe months of suffering. A brain bleed, a damaged liver. Bruises scattered across her tiny body like fingerprints of violence. And then Bibbs spoke, her explanation. She fell from a car seat. Doctors exchanged glances. They had heard some bad excuses before. But this was insulting, because they knew that a fall from a car seat doesn't cause multiple fractures, internal bleeding, and bruises that tell a story of repeated pain. Knew that a mother who cares doesn't wait for silence before calling for help. Bibbs was running out of time, and she didn't even know it yet. Houston PD didn't waste time. A 4-month-old baby was dead, and the only witness? Her mother. Detectives sat across from Tradezsha Bibbs, watching, waiting. She didn't ask how Brielle was, didn't ask what would happen next. She just sat there, arms crossed, lips pressed together. And then she started talking. First excuse. She fell from her car seat. Doctors had already ripped that lie apart. Second excuse. She just wouldn't stop crying. Not exactly a confession, but detectives weren't stupid. They pushed, pressed, and slowly, she cracked. Finally, in a voice so flat, so detached, she muttered, "I didn't care anymore. Not I lost control, not I made a mistake. Just, I didn't care." And then, like she was recounting what she had for breakfast, she admitted, "Every time she cried, I hit her. And I kept hitting her, until she stopped." Detectives didn't flinch, didn't react. They just let her talk. Because the more she spoke, the clearer it became. This wasn't a moment of blind rage. This wasn't desperation. This was calculated. Every cry, punished. Every whimper, met with force. And when Brielle couldn't fight anymore, Bibbs called 911. Not because she regretted it, not because she wanted to save her, but because the game was over. And for the first time in her life, Tradezsha Bibbs wasn't in control anymore. Tradezsha Bibbs walked into the courtroom like she was waiting for a bus. No tears, no remorse, just a woman in a wrinkled jumpsuit staring straight ahead. The prosecution didn't hold back. They didn't need to. The evidence spoke for itself. Broken ribs, brain bleed, internal injuries so severe, the doctors couldn't even count the bruises. Every painful detail laid out, not just for the jury, but for everyone in that room. And if there was ever a moment for Bibbs to break down, to beg for forgiveness, it never came. Her defense team tried. They brought up postpartum depression, a valid, real struggle that affects countless mothers. But here's the thing. She never asked for help, never called a doctor, never reached out to family. Instead, she chose rage over relief. The jury took their time, not because they were undecided, but because what they had to decide wasn't whether she was guilty, but how much mercy she deserved. Felony murder. And then came Judge Robert Johnson, a man known for his calm, unwavering demeanor. He looked at Tradezsha Bibbs, the woman who had taken the life of her own child, and sentenced her to life in prison. And then the prosecutor turned to the jury and said, "She showed as little care for her daughter's death as she did for her life." Tradezsha Bibbs didn't flinch, didn't cry, didn't fight. She just stood as the guards approached. Handcuffs clicked. A door opened. And for the first time in a long time, she had no control over what happened next. A baby is gone, a mother is in prison, and a father left with nothing but grief. This wasn't a case of poverty, not a case of desperation. This was rage, revenge, and a choice. A 4-month-old, barely in this world long enough to know what it meant to be loved, was punished for something she didn't even understand. The question that lingers: could something have been done? Did anyone see the warning signs? Did anyone hear Brielle's cries before they were silenced for good? Here's the thing about stories like this. They don't just end when the trial is over. They live on. They repeat. Somewhere, right now, another child is suffering behind closed doors. Another mother is at her breaking point. Another family is one tragic moment away from headlines. Tradezsha Bibbs will never walk free again. But justice doesn't bring Brielle back. No sentence, no courtroom, no judge will ever undo what was done. But you know what can make a difference? Awareness, action, a single phone call. If you or someone you know is struggling with motherhood, reach out. There is help. There is hope. Brielle Robinson didn't get a second chance, but somewhere out there, another child still can. Beat. The mood shifts slightly, calling the audience to reflect. Now, I want to hear from you. What do you think about this case? Could something have changed the outcome? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's keep this conversation going. And if you found this story important, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss another true crime case that needs to be heard. Because sometimes, the only way to prevent history from repeating itself is to tell the story loud enough for the world to listen.